Thank you very much. So I want to recognize my two co-authors who are not here, Marcelo Farr and Alexis Montesinos. Ariel and I are both here. Ariel is the expert in XBRL. He's the expert in answering difficult questions. So he's here to keep me on task. And my background is a little bit different. I have background in engineering, and I'm now a finance professor at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. So let me just give a little bit of background for both Ariel and I. Several of the presenters earlier today talked about AI in accounting. Ariel and I have a paper that just came out in Accounting Horizons that directly talks about AI in the context of accounting and auditing. And this is a very unique context because of what auditing is particularly. It's going to have a differential effect compared to many other industries. So I encourage you, if you want to think about the effect of AI on accounting and auditing, that's a nice paper to read. We have another paper that I'm not going to talk a lot about, which is about the effect of AI on information markets. We think a lot of the things that could happen over the next 5 years is an aggregation, certainly changing in the way firms get information, and that could have a huge effect over the next several years coming up. But this paper specifically examines reading financial statements using AI, and we're going to talk a lot about the implications for XBRL, which is probably the chief concern of what you guys want to hear about today. So, if you type in, will AI replace XBRL tagging, which I actually did, you get this very nice article, and there's a quote. I'm going to read the quote directly. "It is certainly possible to skip digital tagging and use AI to get answers out of unstructured data." And again, the quote is, "On the other hand, XBRL and AI have the potential to be formidable allies." Now, these are interesting quotes, and they come from xbrl.org. So, what we're going to test in this paper is how good is AI at reading financial statements? What happens if we skip digital tagging, if we don't tag documents? And how much does XBRL help AI? Now, we come at this from an academic perspective. So what we're trying to do is actually create a benchmark for AI performance. How good is AI actually? Now, a lot of the applications of AI have been competing against humans, doing certain things like analyzing data or things like this. And in many contexts, AI is superior to humans. But in an accounting perspective, we actually have an absolute standard, which is this is what the financial statement says. How does AI do in reading it? So it gives us a really nice setting to sort of test how good AI performs. And we're going to do this looking at the complexity of the accounting, which is a really important concept, right? Certain accounting concepts are relatively simple, total assets, for instance. Other concepts are more challenging. Even something like net income has some difficulties, but then also some accounting numbers are in footnotes and not in face financials. So we're going to be able to test all of these things and how well AI performs. And specifically, we're going to test based on the input to the AI models. So we're going to use no context. We're not going to tell AI anything. We're going to use a text input, we're going to use HTML, and then we're going to use an XBRL tagged set of input. So this is really what our paper is doing. Now I'll skip to the chase so that those of you who only care about the final results can see them and doze off for the rest. The major results are AI performs well. It performs well across the contexts. So for an accounting concept like total assets, 84% of the firms, if you give them a text file, will be able to tell you accurately what total assets is. If you give it an HTML file, it's a little higher at 89%. If you give it an XBRL tagged document, we get about 98%. So for those of you who are worried that we're not going to have to tag anymore, so far the answer is no. However, I want to point out if we get more complex accounting metrics, like current income tax expense, which is in a footnote, 49% of text files were accurate, 40% of HTML files, and 74% of XBRL tagged files. Now I want to point out, Mark was here before talking about training models. We're not training the models, we're just giving it the data and saying, how can you do? We're confident that it would do much better if we did actually go through the process of training the models. So with our current approach, what we do is we take a random sample of firms. These are all US firms. We make sure that we're randomly picking from various size deciles. We want really small firms, which may have much simpler accounting, and we want really large firms because they may have more complex accounting and it may be more challenging to read those kinds of documents. We're pulling across industries, and we're also going across various accounting measures. So some very simple things like total assets, some things that may not be in a lot of accounting statements, financial statements, such as raw materials inventory. And we're going to be very careful about whether or not we get an answer and whether or not we should get an answer. Because sometimes, for instance, if you're looking for raw materials inventory, you shouldn't get an answer for some types of firms. And so we're going to pay attention to missing observations, but also we're going to look for hallucinations as well, which is a big concern in industry. So we have this randomly selected set of firms. They come out of Edgar. We're going to merge so Edgar is the electronic data gathering and retrieval system in the US from the Securities Exchange Commission. We're going to merge that to two main databases for accounting information, CalcBench, which does use XBRL tagging, and CompuStat, which does not. Most of my results that I'll be presenting are with the CalcBench comparison. Then we're going to merge to the index file. We're going to pull down HTML and strip out the HTML tags to get text files, and then compare to the three sets of inputs to CalcBench and CompuStat. So for those of you who have seen what the files look like for in the Edgar system, this is a company in our sample called BK Technologies, and this is the annual report. If you were to look at it as a human being, you would look at this document up here, which is an HTML file, but we're actually pulling the instance document, which is the XBRL file, which is how you would electronically access this. A couple of people have asked about PDFs. We don't use PDFs because in the US, things are kept in XML, in an XML file. So we want to run 4 specific tests. The first test is we want to ask about total assets, cash, net income, and various other accounting concepts without giving any context or information at all to the AI bot. And the reason for doing this is we want to make sure it's not been trained. If somebody already trained the AI system to know what the total assets of Tesla are, then we would get an answer, and it's not even learning from the information we're giving it. So it's important that we get no answer or no accuracy if we give it no context, but then we're going to give it 3 sets of files. We're going to give it a text file, we're going to give it an HTML file, and an XBRL file. So these are the major results. I realize this is a bit of an eye chart. I want to point out a couple of important ones here. Across the bottom, we have from left to right, cash, net income, shares outstanding, inventory, revenue, current liabilities, assets, operating cash flow, current income tax expense, and inventory raw materials. I'm going to focus on 2 of these. Total assets, which is the highest bar. We have 798 cases where we get an answer. Sorry, I should also point out the dark blue is with text, the light blue is with HTML, and the tan bar is with XBRL. So those of you who are worried today that XBRL is going away because AI is going to remove all the need for tagging, the results do seem to be more accurate with XBRL. If you look at the number of responses, the number of responses is listed on here. Generally speaking, you get more responses with XBRL files than you get with HTML or text. And so one of the problems with this particular graphic is you're actually comparing different observations. The blue line, the dark blue line, is fewer observations than the tan line. So we want to normalize this so we only look at cases where everybody is giving us an answer, which is this graphic here. And in this case, for instance, total assets, that's the highest bar just off to the right, is 797 observations, and we see a 95% accuracy for XBRL. We see an 89% accuracy for HTML, and an 87% accuracy for text. Now, the interesting one here from our perspective, and we're going to do some more work in the next version of the paper to look at more of the accounting information that's in footnotes, is to look at current income tax expense. Current income tax expenses, on the right there, the lowest bars, and we only find about 75% accuracy for XBRL. If you compare that to text and HTML, they're significantly lower, only about 40 to 50% accurate. But we want to do some more work to sort of understand why these more complex or difficult to understand concepts are a challenge for AI. As I said at the beginning, we're not training the model, so it's important to realize if we were to go through a training process, we definitely believe that the model would perform significantly better. So we do a couple of side tests. We do tests, and this is related to Mark's presentation earlier. We are a little bit worried about our verbiage when we ask for things like inventory versus inventories or revenues versus revenue versus sales. So we're in the process now of doing some more tests in this area. I have some results looking at revenue versus revenues versus sales. And remember, these are large language models that we're using. So language is the thing it does well, and it does well to understand the difference between sales and revenue. Here's an example so you can see we get about 94% accuracy when we ask about revenue, 96% when we ask about revenues, and only about 93% when we ask about sales. Once again, there is some variability across the actual things that we're asking it for. And this is going to be something that we're going to have to optimize our models for to make sure we're asking the most accurate result that we can. So another big concern, and I think this is a huge concern in industry for people who are using this data, is hallucinations. So if I ask you for something and it's not there, please don't help me out by making it up. Don't make up a number. So what we do is we find 19 cases, and this is in raw materials inventory. So a lot of firms don't have raw materials inventory. So this is a good case to look for situations where AI gives me a number and CalcBench or Compustat have no number. So we actually find 19 cases of this where AI tells me this is the number, and when I go to my database, I don't actually find that number. I think I unplugged something. As long as I'm okay in the back, I'll keep going. So 9 of those cases, AI gives me a 0, and CalcBench and Compustat give me a missing value. So in those cases, I'm content that that's an equivalent result. But we do find 10 cases in our sample where AI has a non-zero value and Compustat and CalcBench have a missing value. So we go to each of these cases and we find 8 cases where AI is correct and CalcBench and Compustat are not correct. Now, from an academic perspective, this gives us a challenge because now we're going to have to try to publish this by telling the academic community, your results in these databases that you like to use, they're not as good as what we can do in AI. But that's a different issue. We did find one case where AI actually makes a mistake. In order to get an accurate number for the inventory, it had to add 2 numbers together, and it didn't add those numbers together. And then we found one case that I would call a true hallucination. It reports a number. We can't find this number in the accounting data at all. So I would call that a true hallucination. The bottom line is, I don't think the level of hallucinations are very high. I would argue that they're below 1%. It is true that we could do some more tests by increasing the temperature to get more hallucinations, decreasing the temperature to get fewer hallucinations, and that might be something we do in the future. But at this point, I don't see hallucinations as a significant issue, even when we have accounting data that actually it's not in the financial statements. So in conclusion, I would argue that AI can read financial statements well. Ariel is an accounting professor. He educates people in accounting, and I always tell him, AI performs better than your students do. It performs well without any training, which is really an interesting idea, that it would perform well. We haven't trained the model. It's better than it's better when you give it XBRL than with text or HTML. In general, the structure of HTML seems to give you an improvement over text, but XBRL definitely has an advantage. It seems to be better with simpler accounting measures, although I would argue we need to do some more tests to figure that out. And AI, generally speaking, doesn't seem to be confused by different verbiage that we might use. This seems to be the case regardless of the size of the files. I will tell you, some of the things we'd like to do going forward is to look at retrieval augmented generation. One of the problems you have is that there are some firms with extraordinarily large context files, and because of that, we can't test them all at once. We have to actually chop the files into pieces and use RAG in order to do that. We were concerned that this would add a layer of complexity to our tests. So we have not done that as yet, but that's where we are right now. So if there are any questions or comments, we'd like to hear from you.
So what questions are there for Bill and for Ariel? One here from Phil. Can we pass that back, please?
Thank you very much for that interesting presentation. I was just curious on the example you gave of a complex accounting matter, the income tax matter. I was curious as to why, and maybe this is something you're looking into more, why it's only 70% accurate. Because Lewis will correct me if I'm wrong, but I presume that item is a specific item in the US GAAP taxonomy. So I'm just curious to know why that's not 100% or even 98%. You know how? Oh,
So I can repeat the question.
okay.
The question was for current income tax expense. Our accuracy is about 74%, even though it's tagged, right, in the XBRL tagging. And I'm glad you asked that question, and I turn it over to Ariel because he knows the answer.
Can you go back to
Yeah.
the chart? I was
I'll
trying
go
to
to
get to the chart. So just to be fully transparent, Lewis had an amazing. So he heard us speak before, an earlier version of this. We presented it in an XBRL US environment, and Lewis made a very interesting comment exactly about that. So, if I may quote, it was something like, "I'm surprised by your result because for an AI system, a tag is a tag, regardless of what stands behind it." So our best answer at the time, and unfortunately it hasn't improved yet, is apparently not. So, no, apparently not. So it's not the tag is a tag is a tag. So when you look at so both measures to the right, the current income tax expense and the inventory raw materials are a footnote number, meaning, and in theory, if it's indeed just a tag, then it should be as accurate as the others. I'm not sure. Just to add to that, if you look at net income, so if you look at net income, which is the second from the left, the numbers are quite low, right? So even with XBRL, you're talking about an 80% accuracy. Now, again, I'm an accounting professor, so I think I know accounting. It is likely because of the real complexity of identifying, okay, which one is the net income that you're speaking of, because you have net income attributable and whatever, different versions of net income. So there's something, and there was a discussion throughout the day today about, fully understanding what AI does and what it doesn't do and how it understands or it doesn't understand and so on. So there are clearly things that we don't fully understand on how AI retrieves the numbers. But what Bill and I were trying to do, and I think we did, meaning hopefully you agree that we did, is create a benchmark. So there was discussion throughout the day about, how good is AI? So in our mind, it is this good. Now, why is it this good and not less good or more good, whatever, right? I don't know. I don't know why especially like again Lewis said before, why the tags still represent a challenge if it's just tags. But I don't know if you have a
I don't It's just raising so many questions.
We're academics. We're supposed to do
I
that.
mean,
no?
the first question in my mind is there something here that if we understood what was going on, that we need to do different in the taxonomy or in the filings? I mean, again, a tag is a tag, but
So
Doesn't it take the information from a tag based on the documentation label or the standard label of the tag, and maybe that label is just unclear? Yeah.
But that,
So, so we're introducing, or we're using the instance document.
yeah,
and-
so could we just drill down to that for a second? Just to be specific, you're using the instance document.
We are.
So it's plain old XML syntax.
Yes.
You're not using XML JSON, which is
Nope.
much easier for AI to consume. And you haven't given it the taxonomy.
correct.
And you're saying, give me net income, not IFRS : net income.
Correct.
Because if
Precisely.
you did that with XML JSON, let alone if you added the taxonomy, those are the results I want to see.
So,
Of course.
that was the second part of my question.
Yeah.
What's missing here what is missing here that would really inform the model? And I just heard that. And my related question is...
sorry, just 1 second
Go
related
ahead.
to your comment now. The reason, so Bill presented the case in which we introduced variation in the prompt
Yeah.
for sales and whatever. Sales is not part of the tag in the US. So we were concerned
Yeah.
that, I've been in XBRL for so long, and I'm the one who designed the prompts to some extent. I was concerned that I'm biasing in favor of XBRL,
Yeah,
just
okay.
because when I think of the term, it says like this, which is
Oh, the
exactly the
revenue.
tag, whatever. So the reason we designed that revenue and sales example is because you don't have sales in the tag. So whether it's taking it from the label or something else, we're not sure.
Now,
just don't know.
I also think it's important to state in the next version of the paper, right now, these are the things we've asked. Only 2 of them are in the footnotes. In the next version of the paper, we're going to have about 30 accounting items with a lot more in the footnotes. I think that will help us a lot to sort of figure out, is it a footnote issue? Is it because it's not in the face financials? Or is there something else unique about that?
But to John's point, if you're just using the instance document, if you don't have the extension taxonomy, you don't have the base taxonomy in there, you're missing a really important part of the equation.
Let me...
Can
So-
you even do that practically for your project?
I understand, but so Bill showed the RAG option, which in our group I'm opposed to. And the reason I'm
Was that-
opposed to it...
I missed the first 10 minutes, so
Yeah.
I apologize.
So we're using RAG, or we're thinking about using RAG because the size of the context file is too large. And what we designed here, for better or for worse, obviously we think for better, but for better or for worse, what we designed here is a very, very simple test. Because there has been discussion and there is discussion around how accurate is AI. And what you're saying, in essence, is that, look, by the way, if you were to offer the taxonomy, if you were to offer other information, it would improve the solutions. We have no argument. It goes back
That's by
to Bill's comment
definition,
about the training.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
instance document
So-
really doesn't stand alone.
So,
Right.
but you see that it's better than the others.
Yeah, yeah. No,
So even with all the
the
missing
results
parts,
are still interesting. There's no question. So again, 2 related comments or questions. So with the AI model, there is no way to audit it, right? I mean, you just have no idea. It gives you these results, and it's like, oh, that's
nice. Yeah.
But my other related question is, when I look at this, and I'm hesitant if it's just on the instance document, but these kind of results could really help us in terms of identifying issues in the taxonomy and our modeling.
So
If it was complete, so if this included the extension taxonomy and the base taxonomy, and you were getting these kind of results on taxes, I'd really want to drill in on that and see, what are we doing that's causing the AI to get confused?
So I promise it won't be part of the paper, but what could be really interesting is to add an additional variable to this and check whether the tag that is being used is a taxonomy tag or an extended tag. and see if the accuracy improves if it's a taxonomy tag or not. It's doable, meaning technically it's doable. But
at the end of the
we're
day,
likely-
it's incredibly challenging for us to identify areas that need improvement. We've had false starts on projects over the years. And if we could use an AI application to help us identify problems in filings and problems in text, that would be a huge benefit.
Be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it's worth stating our purpose is not to get the highest accuracy results that we can. Our purpose is to say, let's say somebody doesn't know anything about XBRL and accounting statements, and they just want to do it. If they give the right document, they can get these results with almost no knowledge. I mean, this is very easy to do, right? So even without knowing how to train the model, you can do this.
So I think there's a question from Sean.
Yeah, sorry. With regard to the income tax expense, Corporatings did some research
Sorry, the
on
light is really bright.
the ESEF reports, and they found it was the tag with the worst signage errors. People consistently, with XBRL debit being a positive number, and especially with COVID, people were getting rebates. So it's a very unusual period in our times. How are you classing failure in this? Is it failing to match the tag value or failing to match what you would see on the face, because that's likely to be correct in that situation?
So we've done a lot of tests of failure. In this case, I want an identical match to what is in my database, which is either CalcBench, which is XBRL based, or CompuStat. However, we're also looking at magnitude, being off magnitudes. It's fairly common, if you look at the errors, to be off 3 orders of magnitude. Why would it be 3? Because everything's in thousands or millions, right? So that's fairly common. I have seen a sign mismatch, right, where it's the same number, but the sign is wrong. These are pretty low error rates. So it's not super common. Probably in a longer presentation. Of course, in an academic paper, I'll tell you, this is how many times we're within 10%. This is how many times it's a sign error. This is how many times you're off by 3 orders of magnitude. Like I said, that's probably more common than the sign error.
Yeah, it's not part of the presentation, but we have internal tables that show accuracy correcting for scale errors and accuracy correcting for sign errors, which again are very common. And the qualitatively, the results are the same. So it's not that.
Yeah. Is there another question? Mark.
Thank you. It's a question and also a request, because the numbers in blue here are high, but I assume that's because you are using US GAAP exclusively, right? My initial impression when I'm working with IFRS statements, even when they are written in English, is the same word will have different meanings across countries, especially, right? So in Sweden, the meaning of receivables is not the same as the one in France, for instance. Though in the tags, usually it gets more harmonized. So I would be really interested if in the future you could also extend that to reports using the same standard in different languages or in different countries, because I would expect to have much more variance and much less quality of AI on text on international standards.
So we do have firms in our sample that are IFRS firms. At this point, this will be a self-contained paper and will not go to other languages. It would be too much for an academic paper, but I think your point is well taken. Your presentation illustrated some of the huge issues with that kind of problem.
I just want to add that with the European data, there are two complexities. One is the ease of getting the data, which is a big issue. And the second one is that one goal for us was the comparison between face financials and footnotes, which the European data doesn't allow for. So we decided to go with this, And to Bill's point, I don't know to what extent the foreign private issuers that file with the US SEC, to what extent they would be different than other European companies that do not file with the SEC. So the language issues that you're mentioning, I wonder if you file with the SEC, you know, oh, it's an American crowd, so I'll be more careful with defining receivables in a way that the poor Americans would understand. So that might be something to look at in the future.
The size of the company that file in the US is usually different from
Definitely.
the market, and they pay more attention to having standardized
Definitely,
reports.
yeah.
Is there another question? Well, that's good, because we're right on time. Please join with me in thanking Bill and Ariel for their work.